Hey guys, what's up? I know it's been a while. I've had a lot of questions on my Instagram feed of how I do my spraying techniques. So I'm going to answer some of those questions right now in a detailed video. All you need is an HVLP sprayer such as this Fuji 3-stage that I use, about 4 hours out of your time, and it will be done start to finish. Stay with me, this is something you're going to want to see. Now, when it comes to spraying finish, I've heard a lot of apprehension from a lot of different people, and that's mainly because they tend to stick within their comfort zone. Polyurethanes, acrylics, things of that nature. One of the downsides about doing that particular finish is that one, it's very difficult to fix once it's cured. Two, it takes a long time for it to dry. In between coats, you're probably looking at a minimum of 6 hours. And that's not good if you're doing this for a living. You need something that's very efficient. Turnaround time and dry time is very fast so you can get it over and done with and delivered. Pre-cat lacquers like I've been using have been the standard for cabinet makers for the past 5 or so years. So I'm going to show you how to use a pre-cat lacquer to spray from an HVLP sprayer and have a coat of sanding sealer and 3 coats of lacquer on a project and ready for delivery in 4 hours. That's right, 4 hours. As you might imagine, that can make your turnaround time to get paid much quicker. So let me show you what you're going to need. So from left to right, you're going to need some lacquer thinner, some retarder thinner, sanding sealer, a dull rubbed effect pre-cat lacquer, an extra tub for cleaning thinner when you're done, a stir stick that I use specifically for my pre-cat lacquer satin, another one for my sanding sealer, a measuring cup, and of course a dishpan to make it all nice and clean. Now I did say a dull rubbed effect pre-cat lacquer, and I use dull, which is the equivalent of satin, because the higher the sheen you go in your finish, the more imperfections you're going to see in the project. So most of the time I tend to stick with satin unless the client says otherwise. Now a pre-cat lacquer is actually catalyzed at the store. They actually add an acid into this mixture that basically starts the chemical reaction inside the can. It has a shelf life of about 6 months. So you want to try and get through this in that time frame. And each time that you use it, you want to strain it. Make sure that there are no imperfections in your finish when you go to spray it. Otherwise, it's going to clog your HVLP sprayer. Now, you heard me make mention of a retarder. The retarder is to slow down the drying process of lacquers, because as you know, lacquer dries very, very quickly. If you've used any of the spray can lacquers from the big box stores, you know that it's a very easy product to use because it dries very quickly. This is not a nitrocellulose type of finish. This is actually a pre-catalyzed lacquer, so it's different. And it's a lot higher grade, so it finishes much more smooth. Now, the retarder I use in my area because of the humidity levels in the air. Once the lacquer dries, if it traps any humidity in the finish, it's going to cloud it or blush. And that's something you don't want, especially on a really dark finish such as ebony or just even a black colored stain. So add the retarder in and it will slow the drying chemical reaction process in the lacquer, causing the humidity to be able to escape before it completely dries. I only have to wait roughly about 10 to 15 minutes between coats to be able to apply a second coat. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. So let me show you how I mix my sealer up first, because that's what we're going to start with. Now, when doing your mixtures, when you first start, I recommend using a measuring cup. The mixture ratios that you're going to use for a lot of this is going to be about a 3-to-1 ratio. I've done this enough by eye that I know what works for my finish. So what I've done is I pre-strained my sealer and I filled it into my cup here about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way up. The rest of it is lacquer thinner. You want to be sure and mix these two together very, very well before you start spraying. Well, forgive the noise. My neighbor decided to mow and weed eat his yard just now. So just bear with me. Now, the reason why you want to start with a sanding sealer is that it makes it so much easier to sand. Lacquer in itself is very difficult to sand, and as you've seen on sandpaper, it creates these little nubs and it gums up the sandpaper and it does not make for a smooth finish. Sealer is very easy to sand. It almost makes like a white powder as you're sanding it, which creates not only a smooth surface, but it preps the surface for the lacquer to stick to. Very, very important step. Do not skip the sealer. So I just applied sanding sealer to both doors. By the time I was done with that second door, which as you saw didn't take any time at all, this door is now completely ready for some sanding. Literally, it's only been about 3 minutes. Sanding sealer dries very quickly. So now I'm going to take a random orbit sander with a really high grit sandpaper, upwards of around 600, and I'm going to sand this sealer down. It's going to create a white fine powder that I'll just brush off before applying my lacquer. If you do this step, applying all your lacquers, you should not have to sand in between lacquer coats because it will be super smooth. So as you can see, this is sanded sealer. This is not. This is now super silky smooth to the touch. This is still slightly rough. Now I only use the random orbit sander on flat surfaces. Anything that's rounded over, the sander will take off the stain if you have a stained product. So don't use it on any corners. Take the sandpaper off the sander and then just do it by hand real quick. Doesn't take much to sand sealer. Now before I apply my lacquer, I've got to wipe this off and get all the dust off as much as possible. I find that these blue shop towels that come in a roll, either from O'Reilly's or AutoZone, Walmart, wherever you can find them, they leave a very lint-free surface whenever you're done. So highly recommend these when it comes to applying finish and removing dust. All right, now it's time to get the lacquer applied. Now I've already done sanding sealer on both sides of the doors. I've sanded them all, I've removed all the dust, and I flipped them back over to the good side facing down. And we're going to apply the lacquer now, probably 3 coats worth all the way around. So now, what I've done is I've taken some lacquer thinner and I've put it into the canister. I've taken some pre-cat lacquer, strained it into the cup, and now I've got about 2 ounces. And like I said, this mixture is about a 3-to-1. Remember that. I've got about 2 ounces of retarder. This will slow the drying process enough for the lacquer to flatten out and the moisture to evaporate, so I have a nice, smooth, clear finish when I'm done. So we'll pour 2 ounces of that in there and then give it a really good stir. Now there's one thing I really like to do in between coats. The tip of your gun can sometimes become clogged in the fan and make your finish very blotchy in a couple of places. So I always like to take that tip off and then dunk it in some thinner and then put it back on. Make sure that the holes are completely clean. That way my fan will be nice and symmetrical all the way down the line. Now applying sealer and applying finish are 2 totally different things. The technique is pretty similar, however, the method about how you go to attack it needs to be different. So whenever you are applying finish on something that's tall, you want to start from the top and work your way down. If you start from the bottom and go up, the overspray that you're going to get up here on a finish that's already started to cure down here will get really, really rough. So always start from the top and work your way completely down, and that way your finish won't have any overspray on an already cured surface. Like I said, this stuff dries very, very fast. So by the time you're done starting from here and working down, this will have already started to almost be completely cured and ready for another coat by the time you get down here. Now another good habit you want to have is you don't want to start in the middle. Whenever I applied the sealer, I started in the middle and worked my way out this way. So by the time I come over here and start in the middle again, this area has already started to cure. So when I go to spray it over, I'm probably going to get some roughness in the middle. So start on one edge and work your way all the way to the other edge. Whenever you spray, do a half overlap of your fan. So whatever the distance is of your fan, make your next pass the edge of the fan right in the middle, and the middle of it right on the edge of the first pass, if that makes sense. So if your first fan is here, then make your next fan right about here, and then continue on all the way across your door or project. Alright, it's been roughly about 10 minutes since I finished this door, made my way over to that door, and sprayed the header boards all in one shot. And now this door is completely dry to the touch, super smooth, and ready for a second coat. I can get all of those coats done in under 5 minutes, and by the time I'm done, it'll be ready for a third coat. So let's get to it. Now here's a really important tip that'll really behoove you. You've spent all this time making this finish gorgeous, smooth to the touch, and perfect ready for install. The last thing you want to do is take your sprayer and set it on your project, because if there's any hint of thinner or even just wet lacquer on here, it'll create a ring in your surface that you will have a time to get out, basically sanding this thing down. So don't make the mistake of setting this down on your project even if it is dry. This is not fully cured, so a solvent such as thinner can really ruin it. Alright, I'm nearing the finish line, guys. First coat's on the good face. I got the second and third, should be on in under 30 minutes. I'm almost there. But I wanted to answer a couple of questions that have come up in the past. Let's just say that you're in an area that had high humidity. Let's just say you ended up spraying it right after a thunderstorm and the humidity level's really high. Even though you use retarder, you still get some blushing. How do you get rid of it? Well, taking retarder and putting it into your gun, straight retarder, nothing else, and spraying a light coat on your project will allow that solvent to penetrate the cured lacquer and make it soft again to where the humidity can escape, and then it will dry completely flat again with no blushing. If you have something that drips onto your finish, you can take a cloth with some thinner and just kind of dab at it. Don't smear it, just dab at it, and it will remove that dot of finish, and then you can go back over it with another coat of lacquer and it will fix that problem. So this stuff is really easy to fix as long as you know the proper way to do it. That's why I prefer using this over polyurethane any day. Alright, third and final coat, now on both doors and both header boards. This is done. So I started this filming process at 10 o'clock this morning. It is now 2:30. And as you know, filming something easily doubles, if not triples, your build time. So if you can imagine not having the camera on, not talking to the camera, and just doing the job, you could have had this done in about 2 hours. And that is ready for delivery. Now, the thing about pre-cat lacquers, the first 20 minutes, 80% of the lacquer is cured. The remainder 20% requires about another 28 to 30 days. So if you are giving these to your client, make sure you instruct them not to put anything heavy, hot, or something that can mar the finish until the 28 days is up. I highly recommend pre-cat lacquers for furniture because it stands up really, really well to abuse. Up against normal lacquers. So keep that in mind, that if you use a pigmented lacquer or a tinted lacquer, something that you can't get in a pre-cat form, you're going to have to spray a pre-cat lacquer on top of it after it's done to make sure that you have that hard as nails finish after the 28 days is up. If you guys have seen Todd Clippenger do the demonstration of how pre-cat lacquers on a piece of wood is just as hard as granite, can stand up to hot water as well as a hot boiling pan, you will probably change your mind about using anything else for finishes. Now when it comes to cleaning your gun, nothing can be simpler. The measuring cup that I have is used to hold all the small parts that I take out of the gun, and this extra bucket that I told you to have on hand with some thinner in it will take care of the large parts. I've taken the gun mildly apart, like the big chunks of pieces, and I've put them in the thinner. They're only going to sit in there maybe about a minute. I'll take them out, dry them off, blow them out, make sure that they are completely ready to go to assemble once all the parts are dried. So I know that some people will fight me on this and say that you should never submerge your gun like this, but this does get it clean, and then just spray it with some lubricant in the areas that need it each and every time that you do it, and it will repay you whenever you go to finish for the next time. Okay guys, that's it. As you can see, from 10 o'clock today to 3:30 right now, these are done, and as you can see, I've moved them into the shop because they are completely dry and smooth, smooth, smooth to the touch. So that is efficiency. I filmed this entire thing and got it done in about 5 hours. As I said before, filming doubles my time easily, which is why I don't do all of my projects. So you guys can do something like this in about 2 hours, start to finish, ready for delivery. That's efficiency. So that is all the questions that I have been asked on how I do my finishing techniques. So if you guys have any more questions, feel free to drop them down in the comments below. The products that I get from Sherwin-Williams. And I highly recommend that if you go, talk to the professionals there, let them know what it is you want to do, whether you want to spray, brush, if you need a pre-cat lacquer, a standard lacquer, pigmented, tinted, whatever. Whenever somebody needs me to paint something, I don't get a latex from the big box stores. I go to Sherwin-Williams and I get a pigmented lacquer. It goes on like paint, used from my spray gun, and it dries as fast as lacquer. Then, if I want it to be even more protected, I'll spray a pre-cat lacquer right on top of that, and it will protect it and be hard as nails after a good month of setting and curing. So that about wraps it up, guys. Thank you very much. Like I said, drop your questions, comments down below. Hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that I cleared up a lot of questions that you guys had. And sorry it's been so long since my last video, but hopefully I can do some more of these like this in the future. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Please take care, be safe in your shops, and as always, boom!